What if the person holding you back is you? Not your circumstances, not your past, not your failures, you. There are moments in life when we reach a limit. We tell ourselves, this is as far as I can go. I'm too tired. I'm not capable. I've already been through enough. And sometimes we believe those thoughts so completely that they become our identity. David Goggins built his life around challenging that identity. His story begins in a place far removed from extraordinary achievement. It begins with pain, fear, self-doubt, failure, and a life that seemed to be moving in the wrong direction. But instead of accepting that life as permanent, he began asking a different question. What if I am capable of much more than I believe? That question became the foundation of a transformation. Not a transformation based on motivation, but on discipline, accountability, pain, and the willingness to repeatedly confront the limits of his own mind. Goggins doesn't present transformation as something comfortable. Quite the opposite. He argues that growth often begins where comfort ends. Most people stop when something becomes difficult. They reach a point where the mind says, enough, and they listen. But what if that feeling of enough isn't always a true limit? What if sometimes it is simply the point where discomfort becomes unbearable? This distinction is central to Goggins' philosophy. The body and mind are capable of adapting, but adaptation requires exposure to difficulty. You cannot become mentally stronger by avoiding every situation that challenges you. You become stronger by repeatedly proving to yourself, I can handle this. That doesn't mean ignoring injury. It doesn't mean being reckless. And it doesn't mean suffering for no reason. It means recognizing that discomfort and danger are not the same thing. Sometimes discomfort is simply the feeling of growth. And if you always escape discomfort, you may never discover what you're capable of becoming. Goggins' early life was filled with experiences that shaped how he saw himself. He faced hardship, fear, insecurity, and circumstances that could easily have become permanent excuses. For a long time, they did. He didn't begin as the person people eventually came to admire. He struggled. He'd gained weight. He lacked direction. He felt trapped by his circumstances. And perhaps most importantly, he began to believe the story those circumstances were telling him. That he was limited. That his past defined him. That his life couldn't become something different. But eventually, he reached a point where he could no longer accept that story. He realized something uncomfortable. Nobody was coming to rescue him. If his life was going to change, he had to take responsibility for changing it. That realization is powerful because responsibility can feel frightening. If everything is someone else's fault, you have no control. But once you accept responsibility, you also accept power. You may not control what happened to you, but you can begin deciding what happens next. One of the first enemies Goggins had to confront was the version of himself he had accepted. He had become comfortable with certain explanations. I can't. I'm not ready. This is too difficult. People like me don't do things like that. These thoughts can sound reasonable, but repeated often enough, they become beliefs. And beliefs influence behavior. If you believe you are incapable, you stop trying before you discover otherwise. If you believe you're weak, every difficult moment becomes evidence. If you believe you're disciplined, you start behaving like someone who keeps promises to themselves. This creates an important question. How much of your identity is based on evidence, and how much is based on repetition? Maybe you've told yourself for years that you're not confident, not disciplined, not intelligent enough, not capable enough. But a belief repeated for a long time
doesn't automatically become a fact. Sometimes it simply becomes familiar. And familiar doesn't mean true. Goggins began confronting this problem through brutal honesty. Instead of protecting himself from uncomfortable truths, he looked directly at them. This is one of the most difficult forms of self-improvement. Most people want encouragement. Few people want an accurate mirror. A mirror doesn't care whether you feel comfortable. It simply shows you what is there. Goggins used this idea psychologically. He examined his weaknesses, his habits, his excuses, his failures, his physical condition, and his lack of discipline. The point wasn't self-hatred. It was awareness. You cannot change something you refuse to acknowledge. If you lie to yourself, you protect the problem. If you tell yourself the truth, you create the possibility of change. That is why radical honesty can be so powerful. Ask yourself, where am I making excuses? What do I keep avoiding? What promise do I repeatedly break to myself? What uncomfortable truth do I already know but don't want to admit? The answers may hurt, but sometimes painful truth is more useful than comfortable denial. One of Goggins' most powerful ideas is that the mind has a governor, a psychological limit that tells you when to stop. Imagine running. Your body becomes tired. Your breathing becomes difficult. Your legs begin to hurt. Your mind says, stop. And often you do. But Goggins became obsessed with understanding what happens when you continue beyond that first signal. Again, this does not mean ignoring genuine physical danger. It means questioning the assumption that every signal of discomfort means you have reached your absolute capacity. The mind often tries to protect us. It prefers safety. It prefers familiarity. It prefers conserving energy. That is useful for survival. But it can become a limitation when your goal requires adaptation. The first signal of discomfort may be real without being the final boundary of what you're capable of. Sometimes the mind says, I can't, when what it really means is, I don't want to experience this level of discomfort anymore. Learning to recognize that difference can completely change how you approach difficult goals. This idea extends far beyond exercise. Think about learning a difficult skill. At first, everything feels confusing. You make mistakes, progress is slow, your brain wants to escape. You think, maybe I'm just not good at this. But what if difficulty is not evidence that you're incapable? What if difficulty is simply the price of learning? The same thing happens with communication, career growth, building a business, developing discipline, changing habits. The early stage is uncomfortable because you're operating outside your current ability. If you quit every time you feel incompetent, you remain trapped at your current level. Goggins' philosophy is essentially a challenge to that pattern. Don't automatically interpret discomfort as failure. Sometimes discomfort is information. It tells you, this is unfamiliar. This requires adaptation. This is exposing a weakness. And weakness isn't necessarily something to hide. It can become a training ground. The question is not, am I already good at this? The better question is, am I willing to become good at this? You don't simply want to complete one project. You want to become someone who follows through. When identity changes, behavior often becomes easier to sustain. You stop asking, do I feel like doing this today? And begin asking, what would the person I'm becoming do? That question can create a powerful shift because your actions are constantly providing evidence about who you believe you are. Every small, disciplined action becomes a vote, not for perfection, but for the identity you're building. Another important lesson is the danger of comfort. Comfort feels harmless. Sometimes it is. Rest is necessary. Recovery is necessary. Enjoyment is necessary. But a life built entirely around avoiding discomfort can become extremely small.
You can feel unmotivated and still begin. This is how self-trust develops. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you collect evidence. You begin to believe, I do what I say I will do. And every time you repeatedly break your own promises, the opposite happens. Self-confidence is not always built by positive thinking. Sometimes it's built by keeping your word to yourself. Goggins also emphasizes the importance of confronting the past, not because you should live in it, but because unresolved experiences can shape the person you become. Your past can become an explanation. I behave this way because of what happened. And sometimes that explanation is valid, but an explanation can become a prison if you use it to justify never changing.
Goggins' approach is different. Look at what happened. Understand it. Acknowledge the damage. Then ask, what am I going to do with it? You cannot rewrite your childhood. You cannot erase painful experiences. You cannot change the decisions other people made. But you can decide whether those experiences become the final definition of your life. Your past can be a weight, or it can become fuel. The difference is what you do with it. This is not about pretending pain didn't matter. It is about refusing to give pain unlimited authority over your future. You may have been shaped by what happened to you, but you are not required to remain trapped there. One of the most powerful concepts in Goggins' story is the idea of the accountability mirror. The basic principle is simple. Look at yourself honestly, not the version you present to other people, not the version you wish you were, the version that actually exists. Ask, are you keeping your commitments? Are you doing the work? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you making excuses? Are you blaming circumstances? Are you avoiding difficult things? These questions can be uncomfortable, but they move responsibility inward. And that is important. Because you cannot control everything outside yourself. You can't control other people's behavior. You can't control every opportunity. You can't control your past. But you can influence your preparation, your effort, your habits, your response, your consistency. The accountability mirror isn't designed to make you feel bad. It is designed to remove the fog. Once you see the truth, you can work with reality. And reality is always a better starting point than fantasy. Goggins also discovered that goals become more powerful when they are connected to identity. If you say, I want to exercise more, that's a goal. But if you begin seeing yourself as someone who keeps commitments, the behavior becomes part of who you are. This distinction matters. Goals can be completed. Identity continues. You don't simply want to finish one workout. You want to become someone who takes care of their body. You don't simply want to study for one exam. You want to become someone who can learn difficult things. You don't simply want to complete one project. You want to become someone who follows through. When identity changes, behavior often becomes easier to sustain. You stop asking, do I feel like doing this today? And begin asking, what would the person I'm becoming do? That question can create a powerful shift because your actions are constantly providing evidence about who you believe you are. Every small, disciplined action becomes a vote, not for perfection, but for the identity you're building. Another important lesson is the danger of comfort. Comfort feels harmless. Sometimes it is. Rest is necessary. Recovery is necessary. Enjoyment is necessary. But a life built entirely around avoiding discomfort can become extremely small. You avoid difficult conversations. You avoid challenging work. You avoid uncertainty. You avoid failure. You avoid physical effort. You avoid anything that makes you uncomfortable. And gradually, your comfort zone becomes your cage. Goggins deliberately pushed against this tendency. He believed that regularly confronting difficult experiences could expand your capacity, not because suffering is inherently good, but because challenge teaches you what you can handle. Think about the first time you did something difficult. It may have felt impossible. Then you did it. The next time, it was still difficult, but it was familiar. Eventually, your definition of hard changed. That's adaptation. The challenge didn't necessarily become easy. You became stronger.
This is why consistency matters more than occasional intensity. One extraordinary day doesn't transform you. Repeated effort does. You can have one perfect workout, one extremely productive day, one amazing week. But what happens afterward? Real transformation comes from repetition. Doing the work when nobody is watching. Keeping the promise when there is no applause. Continuing after the excitement disappears. This is where discipline becomes more important than motivation. Motivation loves beginnings. Discipline survives middles. Anyone can feel excited on day 1. The real test comes on day 30, when the novelty is gone, the goal feels distant, and nobody is praising you. That's when your identity matters. Do you continue because this is who you are becoming? Or do you stop because the excitement disappeared?
Goggins' philosophy repeatedly returns to this idea. You don't build strength by proving what you can do once. You build it by proving that you can return, again and again. Failure also plays a different role in Goggins' philosophy. Most people try to avoid failure. Understandably, failure can hurt your confidence. It can embarrass you. It can make you question yourself. But failure can also provide information. It shows you where your current ability ends. It reveals weaknesses. It exposes assumptions. It tells you what needs to change. Imagine you attempt something difficult and fail. You have 2 choices. You can interpret the failure as, I'm not capable, or I now know something I didn't know before. The second interpretation keeps the door open. Failure becomes feedback. That doesn't make failure pleasant. It makes it useful.
And sometimes the most important lesson comes from the moment when your original strategy stops working. You're forced to adapt, to learn, to become more resourceful, to try again differently. The goal isn't to become someone who never fails. That person doesn't exist. The goal is to become someone who can fail, learn, and continue. Goggins also challenges the idea that confidence must come before action. Many people wait to feel confident. They say, when I feel ready, I'll start. But confidence often comes after action, not before it. You do something difficult. You survive it. You learn from it. Then your brain receives evidence. I handled that. That evidence becomes confidence. So instead of waiting for confidence, build evidence. Take the small action. Have the difficult conversation. Learn the skill. Complete the workout. Make the call. Submit the application. Every action creates information about yourself. Over time, those experiences change your self-image. You don't have to convince yourself you're capable. You can demonstrate it. And demonstrated capability is much stronger than positive self-talk. Tell yourself, I can do this. But then, go do something that proves it. There is another powerful idea in Goggins' story, the importance of knowing your own limits. This may sound contradictory. If he constantly pushes beyond limits, why talk about knowing them? Because you cannot expand a boundary you refuse to identify. You need to know where you currently are. What can you do? What can't you do? What skills are missing? What habits are holding you back? What weaknesses keep repeating? Honesty gives you a baseline. Then you can train. Imagine someone wants to become physically stronger. They need to know their current condition. The same applies mentally. Maybe your current limit is consistency. Maybe it's confidence. Maybe it's focus. Maybe it's emotional control. Maybe it's the ability to tolerate uncertainty. Whatever the weakness, name it. Once you name it, you can train it. A weakness that remains vague feels overwhelming. A weakness that becomes specific becomes a problem you can work on.
Goggins also talks about the power of small victories. When you are rebuilding yourself, you need evidence that change is possible. That evidence doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be simple. You wake up and you said you would. You complete the task you wanted to avoid. You keep your promise. You finish the workout. You study for 30 minutes. You choose discipline once, then again, and again. Each action may seem insignificant, but together, they create a new story. I am becoming someone who follows through. That story matters because transformation is partly psychological. You are not only changing your behavior, you are changing what you believe about yourself. And the strongest beliefs are built from evidence. So don't underestimate small commitments. If your current life feels chaotic, don't try to rebuild everything tomorrow. Choose one promise. Keep it. Then choose another. Self-respect can be rebuilt one kept promise at a time. Another lesson is that pain can teach you, but pain alone doesn't guarantee growth. This distinction matters. Suffering does not automatically make someone stronger. What matters is how you respond to difficulty. You can experience hardship and become bitter. Or you can experience hardship and become more resilient. You can fail and give up. Or fail and... You can experience rejection and decide you're worthless. Or use it to become more capable. Pain gives you information. Your response gives it meaning. This is why Goggins focuses so heavily on deliberate challenge. He isn't simply glorifying suffering. He is using difficulty as training. The objective is adaptation. You deliberately enter situations that demand more from you, then learn that you can survive and improve. Over time, your psychological tolerance expands. The things that once overwhelmed you may become manageable, not because life became easier, but because you became more capable of handling it. This idea applies to emotional resilience too. Sometimes the difficult thing isn't physical. It's rejection, criticism, embarrassment, uncertainty, being misunderstood, failing publicly. These experiences can trigger powerful emotions, and the instinct is often to escape, avoid the situation, stop trying, withdraw. But emotional strength can also be developed through exposure. You can learn to tolerate discomfort without immediately reacting. Someone criticizes you? You don't have to defend yourself instantly. Someone rejects an idea? You don't have to collapse. Something doesn't go according to plan? You don't have to decide that everything is ruined. You can feel the emotion and still choose your response. That is resilience. Not becoming emotionless, becoming less controlled by every emotion. You don't need to eliminate fear. You need to learn that fear can exist while you continue moving. You don't need to eliminate discomfort. You need to learn that discomfort doesn't automatically mean stop. One of Goggins' most important ideas is that the mind can be trained like the body. If you repeatedly challenge yourself, your tolerance changes. You become familiar with difficulty. You learn that discomfort passes. You learn that fatigue isn't always the end. You learn that fear doesn't always mean danger. And perhaps most importantly, you learn that your thoughts are not commands. Your mind can say, stop. You can answer, not yet. Your mind can say, this is too difficult. You can respond, let's take the next step. This doesn't mean ignoring genuine warning signs. It means separating useful information from automatic resistance. Your brain is designed to protect you, but sometimes protection becomes overprotection. The goal isn't to fight your mind. It's to train your relationship with it. You can notice the thought without obeying it. You can feel the emotion without surrendering to it. That is mental toughness. Another important lesson is preparation. When people see extraordinary performance, they often see the final moment, the race, the achievement, the success. They don't see the thousands of ordinary moments that came before it. The early mornings, the repetition, the boring work, the failures, the days when nobody was watching. Preparation creates the person who can perform when the moment arrives. This applies everywhere. If you want confidence in an interview, prepare. If you want to perform under pressure, practice under pressure. If you want discipline, practice keeping small commitments. If you want to handle difficult conversations, practice staying calm when conversations are uncomfortable. You don't magically become strong when the crisis arrives. You reveal what you've trained. That is why ordinary days matter. They are not separate from your future. They are preparing you for it.
Every day is rehearsal for the person you will become. Goggins' story also challenges another common belief, that motivation must come from a positive vision. Sometimes motivation comes from refusing to return to an old version of yourself. You remember where you were. You remember what it felt like to be trapped. You remember the excuses, the weakness, the lack of control. And you decide, I am not going back. That memory becomes fuel. This doesn't mean living in the past. It means using the past as contrast. You know what you don't want, and that can clarify what you do want. Transformation often becomes stronger when it has a clear emotional reason. Not simply, I want to become successful, but I refuse to remain the person who keeps betraying their own potential. That is a different kind of commitment. It is personal.
And personal commitments can survive when external motivation disappears. But there is a danger in constantly chasing more. If you believe you are never enough, you can become trapped in endless dissatisfaction. So the goal shouldn't be permanent self-rejection. Goggins' philosophy is about challenging limitations, not hating yourself. There is an important difference. Self-hatred says, I am worthless. Growth says, I can become better. Self-hatred destroys energy. Growth directs energy. You can accept who you are today and still refuse to remain exactly the same. You can appreciate your progress and still have another goal. You can rest and still be disciplined. You can be proud without becoming complacent. Strength doesn't require constant punishment. It requires honesty. The question is not, am I good enough? The better question is, am I living up to what I know I can become? Another powerful principle is taking ownership of your choices. You may not control your circumstances, but you control more than you think. You control whether you prepare, whether you practice, whether you learn, whether you ask for help, whether you keep your word, whether you get back up, whether you change your strategy. This doesn't mean circumstances don't matter. They do.
Asking, do I feel like doing this? And started asking, does this need to be done? Feelings matter. They contain information, but they don't always need to be in charge. Discipline means allowing your values and commitments to guide behavior, even when your mood disagrees. Instead of, why is this happening to me? Ask, what can I do next? Instead of, this isn't fair. Ask, given the situation, what is my best move? Those questions don't deny reality. They turn your attention toward action. And action is where change begins. You cannot always choose the starting point, but you can influence the direction. Goggins also teaches the importance of becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. This doesn't mean seeking suffering everywhere. It means not allowing comfort to make every decision for you. Sometimes you need to do the difficult thing. Have the conversation. Take the opportunity. Learn the skill. Wake up early enough to complete the work. Say no. Say yes. Start before you're ready. Finish when you're tired. These moments create psychological strength. Because every time you act despite discomfort, you teach yourself something. My feelings don't control every decision. That is powerful.
Imagine how different your life could become if you stopped asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" and started asking, "Does this need to be done?" Feelings matter. They contain information, but they don't always need to be in charge. Discipline means allowing your values and commitments to guide behavior, even when your mood disagrees.
One of the deepest lessons from Goggins' journey is that transformation is uncomfortable because identity is changing. The old version of you knows how to live one way. The new version requires different behavior. That creates tension. Your old habits pull you backward. Your new goals pull you forward. You may feel like you're fighting yourself. In a way, you are. But every time you choose the new behavior, the new identity becomes stronger. You don't become disciplined by deciding once that you are disciplined. You become disciplined by repeatedly acting like a disciplined person. You don't become courageous by declaring yourself fearless. You become courageous by repeatedly acting while fear is present. You don't become resilient by wishing for resilience. You become resilient by recovering from difficulty, again and again. Identity follows repeated behavior. This is why Goggins' story is ultimately about self-mastery, not perfection, not becoming invincible. Self-mastery means increasing your ability to choose your response. You still feel tired. You still feel fear. You still experience doubt. You still have bad days. The difference is that these things don't automatically decide your behavior. You can acknowledge them and continue. You can rest when rest is necessary. You can stop when stopping is wise. But you become more capable of distinguishing "I should stop" from "I simply want to stop." That distinction is incredibly important because sometimes quitting is wisdom, and sometimes quitting is avoidance. Mental toughness is learning to tell the difference. It requires honesty, awareness, experience, and the willingness to examine your own motives. Sometimes the hardest person to understand is yourself. And perhaps that is why the accountability mirror matters so much. Every day, you have the opportunity to look at your behavior, not your intentions, your behavior. Did you do what you said? Did you avoid something? Did you make an excuse? Did you learn? Did you improve? Did you keep your standards? The answers don't need to be perfect. They need to be honest. If you failed, acknowledge it. If you succeeded, acknowledge that too. Then continue. You don't need to punish yourself for every mistake. You need to learn from it. Self-awareness without action becomes reflection. Action without self-awareness becomes repetition. You need both. Look honestly, then move. That is how you gradually become harder to fool, especially by yourself. Another important idea is the power of doing things you once believed were impossible. When you accomplish something that previously seemed beyond you, your mental map changes. You realize, maybe my limits aren't where I thought they were. That doesn't mean everything becomes possible. It means your assumptions become more flexible. One achievement becomes evidence, then another. Your confidence grows from experience. This is why setting difficult but meaningful challenges can be powerful. Not impossible challenges, challenges that require you to become better, something that forces you to prepare, something that requires consistency, something that makes you confront a weakness. When you complete it, you don't simply gain the result. You gain knowledge about yourself. You discover, I can handle more than I thought. And that knowledge can carry into other areas of life. Physical confidence can influence mental confidence. Professional discipline can influence personal discipline. A habit of keeping promises can influence every part of your life.
But perhaps the greatest transformation is learning to stop negotiating with yourself. You know the alarm is going to ring. You already decided what you need to do. Then the morning comes and your mind starts negotiating. 5 more minutes. I'll do it later. Today isn't a good day. Tomorrow will be better. This is where discipline is tested. The decision was made yesterday. The emotion arrives today. If you renegotiate every commitment based on how you feel in the moment, your plans become suggestions. A stronger approach is to decide your standards in advance, then follow them when reasonable. You don't need to debate every morning whether you are going to keep your word. You've already decided. This removes a huge amount of mental friction. The goal isn't to become rigid. It's to reduce unnecessary negotiation with yourself. Sometimes, freedom comes from having fewer decisions to make. Goggins' philosophy also teaches that comparison can be dangerous. Your real competition is often the version of yourself that you were yesterday. Someone else may be stronger, faster, richer, more successful, more experienced. That comparison can either inspire you or destroy your confidence. But your progress doesn't need to match someone else's timeline. Your starting point is different. Your history is different. Your responsibilities are different. Instead of asking, why am I not where they are? Ask, am I moving forward from where I started? That creates a healthier form of competition. You compete against your own excuses, your own inconsistency, your own fear, your own tendency to quit. You don't need to defeat everyone. You need to become more capable than you were before. Progress can be quiet. Nobody may notice, but you will. And eventually, the person you become will be evidence of all those days when you kept going. Another lesson is that your environment matters. If everyone around you constantly chooses comfort, your own standards can gradually decline. If everyone around you makes excuses, excuses begin to sound normal. If everyone around you avoids difficult things, challenge begins to look unnecessary. But the opposite can happen too. Spend time around people who value discipline, and higher standards become normal. You begin seeing effort differently. You begin expecting more from yourself. This doesn't mean surrounding yourself only with extreme people. It means becoming conscious of what your environment reinforces. What behaviors are being rewarded? What attitudes are being normalized? What does your social circle make easy, and what does it make difficult? Sometimes changing your environment is easier than fighting the environment every day. You don't have to become someone else overnight, but you can make the behaviors you want easier to repeat. Environment shapes behavior. There is another powerful lesson hidden in Goggins' story: the importance of doing things without needing recognition. Modern life makes external validation easy to chase. Likes, comments, praise, approval, followers, people knowing what you accomplished. But if your discipline depends on recognition, what happens when nobody notices? Real growth often happens privately. Nobody sees the workout. Nobody sees the hours of study. Nobody sees the rejection. Nobody sees the moments when you wanted to quit, but didn't. Those moments matter. They build internal confidence. You know what you did. You don't need everyone else to know. This creates a different kind of strength. You stop performing discipline, you practice it. You stop trying to look strong. You become stronger. And eventually, the results speak for themselves. Goggins also emphasizes the importance of accepting that progress is not always linear. There will be bad days. Days when you perform poorly, days when motivation disappears, days when circumstances interfere. One bad day doesn't erase your progress. The danger is turning a temporary setback into an identity. I failed today becomes I'm a failure. Those are completely different statements. The first describes an event. The second defines a person. Stay specific. What went wrong? What can you learn? What needs to change tomorrow? Goggins also emphasizes the importance of accepting that progress is not always linear. There will be bad days. Days when you perform poorly. Days when motivation disappears. Days when circumstances interfere. One bad day doesn't erase your progress. The danger is turning a temporary setback into an identity. I failed today becomes I'm a failure. Those are completely different statements. The first describes an event. The second defines a person. Stay specific. What went wrong? What can you learn? What needs to change tomorrow? Then continue. Resilience doesn't mean never falling off track. It means returning to the track, again and again. Your ability to recover matters more than your ability to be perfect. Perfection is fragile. Consistent.
Perhaps this is where Goggins' message becomes most relevant to ordinary life. You may never run an ultramarathon. You may never join the military. You may never attempt the extreme physical challenges he describes. You don't need to. The deeper lesson is about confronting the limits you have accepted. Maybe your challenge is waking up consistently. Maybe it's learning a new skill. Maybe it's improving your career. Maybe it's paying off debt. Maybe it's becoming more confident. Maybe it's finally finishing something you've postponed for years. The question is the same. What are you repeatedly telling yourself you cannot do? And is that actually true? Maybe you can't do it today. That doesn't mean you can't learn to do it. Maybe you're not ready. That doesn't mean you can't prepare. Maybe you failed before. That doesn't mean the next attempt has to look like the previous one. The point isn't to become someone extraordinary overnight. It's to stop underestimating what disciplined effort can accomplish over time. The strongest version of you isn't created during the easiest days. It is built during the moments when you have a choice. Quit or continue. Avoid or confront. Blame or take responsibility. Make an excuse or make a plan. Wait for motivation or act according to your values. Those choices may feel small, but repeated choices become character, and character becomes destiny. This is why discipline is so powerful. It is not one giant decision. It is thousands of small decisions made consistently. The person you become next year is being shaped by what you repeatedly choose today. Not perfectly, not every day, but often enough. So don't focus only on the giant transformation. Focus on the next decision. What is the right thing to do now? Then do it. And when the next decision arrives, do it again. Maybe the most powerful lesson from Can't Hurt Me is not that you should become tougher than everyone else. It is that you should become harder to stop. Harder to stop by fear. Harder to stop by discomfort. Harder to stop by criticism. Harder to stop by failure. Harder to stop by your own excuses. That doesn't mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming more capable of moving with emotions instead of being controlled by them. Fear can come with you. Doubt can come with you. Fatigue can come with you. But they don't always get to choose the direction. You choose. And every time you make that choice, you become a little more familiar with your own strength. Eventually, you may look back and realize something surprising. The person you thought was weak was never as weak as you believed. You simply hadn't trained them yet.
So ask yourself, where have I accepted a limit without testing it? Where have I allowed comfort to make decisions for me? What promise do I keep breaking? What excuse do I keep repeating? What difficult thing have I been avoiding? And what would happen if I stopped waiting to feel ready? You don't need to answer everything today. Choose one, then act. Make it small enough to begin, but meaningful enough to matter. Keep the promise, then keep another. Build evidence, build discipline, build self-trust. And when your mind tells you, this is too hard, don't automatically believe it. Pause, assess the situation. If you are truly at a dangerous limit, stop. If you're simply uncomfortable, take the next step. That distinction can change your life.
In the end, Can't Hurt Me is not really about becoming invincible. Nobody is invincible. It is about becoming more honest with yourself, more disciplined, more resilient, more willing to confront discomfort, more willing to take responsibility, more willing to discover what you're capable of. Your past may explain you,
but it doesn't have to imprison you. Your circumstances may challenge you, but they don't have to decide your response. Your mind may tell you to stop, but you can learn to question that signal. And your failures may hurt, but they can also teach. You don't need to become David Goggins. You need to become more fully yourself, with fewer excuses standing between you and your potential. Because the strongest person you can become isn't someone who never struggles. It's someone who struggles, learns, gets back up, and keeps moving. Maybe the real challenge isn't becoming stronger than everyone else. Maybe it's becoming stronger than the version of yourself that keeps saying, I can't. The version that waits for motivation. The version that chooses comfort. The version that blames circumstances. The version that quits when nobody is watching. You don't defeat that version in one dramatic moment. You defeat it through small choices. One morning, one workout, one difficult conversation, one promise kept, one excuse rejected, one more attempt, and then another. Eventually, those small choices become a different life. So when the next difficult moment arrives, remember this. You may not control how hard the road is, but you can decide whether you keep moving. If this book inspired you, like the video and subscribe for more powerful books on mindset, discipline, psychology, self-development, and personal transformation.
And remember, you don't discover your limits by thinking about them. You discover them by challenging them.